by requesting a sit-down with Papua New Guinea's foreign minister. He refused, arguing that bilateral negotiations with an individual delegation might jeopardize the country's neutrality as host. The Chinese tried again, but were once more rebuffed. Undeterred, 4 Chinese diplomats decided to push their way into the foreign minister's office, calling out that they just needed 2 minutes of his time. Security guards then asked the Chinese officials to leave, and police were later posted outside the door. Publicly, Papua New Guinea's foreign minister sought to downplay the incident, telling reporters it was not an issue. Privately, the country's officials described China's behavior throughout the negotiations as bullying. China's foreign ministry denied that the incident ever occurred, calling it a rumor spread by some people with a hidden agenda. As reporters waited for the outcome of the summit, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau eventually confirmed that negotiations over the communiqué had collapsed. "There are differing visions on particular elements," he said, with understatement. For the first time since leaders began attending the annual summit in 1993, no joint statement was issued. The APEC summit should have been an opportunity for China to boost its reputation. Trump had spent the 2 years leading up to the Port Moresby meeting undoing much of the goodwill the United States had developed in the region. Within days of his January 2017 inauguration, he had withdrawn from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a 12-nation trade deal that aimed to help America compete with China's engagement in Asia. He'd gone on to launch a trade war with China, forcing Pacific nations to choose between 2 powers they could not afford to offend. The president had also personally insulted America's partners across the region, hanging up halfway through a January 2017 phone call with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and branding Canada's Trudeau very dishonest and weak. But instead of taking advantage of the opportunity, China emerged from APEC looking ever more like a bully. Its diplomats, the very people who should have been most concerned about their country's reputation, only seemed to be making matters worse. The APEC debacle was just one of a series of setbacks for Chinese diplomacy in the months before and after the summit. 2 months earlier, at the Pacific Islands Forum in the Micronesian microstate of Nauru, China's envoy had walked out of a meeting when the host refused to let him speak ahead of another nation's prime minister. The president of Nauru described the Chinese diplomat as very insolent and a bully. In the months after the Papua New Guinea incident, China's ambassador to Canada publicly accused his hosts of white supremacy. China's chief emissary in South Africa declared that Donald Trump's policies were making the United States the enemy of the whole world. Its representative in Sweden, Gui Zhongyou, labelled the country's police inhumane and blasted its so-called freedom of expression. In the space of just 2 years, Gui was summoned by Sweden's foreign ministry more than 40 times, while 3 of the country's political parties called for him to be expelled. Unabashed, he told Swedish public radio, "We treat our friends with fine wine, but for our enemies we have shotguns." While these aggressive displays won plaudits at home, they compromised China's efforts to cast itself as a peaceful power. The foreign media began to brand this new confrontational approach wolf warrior diplomacy, after a series of Chinese action movies that depicted Rambo-like heroes battling China's enemies at home and abroad. The second in the series, Wolf Warrior 2, told the story of a group of People's Liberation Army soldiers sent to rescue stranded Chinese civilians in a war-torn African nation. The 2017 movie was a huge success for China's film industry, making more than $854 million at the domestic box office. Its tagline read, "Even though 1,000 miles away, anyone who affronts China will pay." The moniker captured the intimidating and sometimes bewildering nature of Chinese diplomacy as seen by the outside world, and it stuck. The behavior of Chinese diplomats grew even more combative as COVID-19 spread around the world in early 2020. Beijing's envoys hit back hard at suggestions China was to blame for the spread of the virus. Some did so on Twitter. "You speak in such a way that you look like part of the virus."